Well, it's continued again today, hasn't it? China moving to dial up the pressure on Australia in the form of senior Chinese Communist Party members and its state-run newspaper blasting Scott Morrison as arrogant. This comes after yesterday's vile, fake war crimes photograph was posted by a senior official of the country's foreign ministry. Now our allies have joined the chorus of condemnation.
New Zealand has registered directly with Chinese authorities our concern over the use of that image. It was an unfactual post, and of course that would concern us. So that is something that we've raised directly in the manner that New Zealand does when we have such concerns.
Well, for more on this and more, Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell joins me now from Canberra. There we have the New Zealand Prime Minister, Andrew, Jacinda Ardern, raising concern, she says, with Chinese authorities about this doctored image. International pressure starting to mount, but of course Twitter is refusing to take down the image, and the Chinese are only escalating their attack.
Well, they are. I mean, they're not apologising. I thought there was a glimmer of hope, though, Peter, in the statement from the embassy this afternoon when it said it was interested in more constructive relationship with Australia. So Scott Morrison said yesterday, even as he severely condemned the actions of the Chinese government, that he was hoping this could become a reset for a more constructive relationship. There was a line right at the base of that Chinese embassy statement today talking about a constructive relationship. So I guess that's the way we've got to hope it goes, because we certainly don't want it to go the way a Global Times report was today in China, seen as a mouthpiece for the Chinese government, suggesting Australian warships in the South China Sea could be in trouble. That's where we don't want to go with this thing. So you've just got to hope now that things settle down, I guess, and further exports aren't threatened.
And perhaps a few ministers in Australia get their calls returned. We still know Foreign Minister and the Trade Minister have no relationship with their counterparts in China.
Yes, and I think the PM made it clear that those attempts have been made, including by him yesterday, in terms of writing, in terms of trying to set up phone calls, and that had all been refused. Pointed out yesterday the fact there hadn't been any summits in this COVID era, Peter, had meant there wasn't the chance for Morrison to interact with President Xi, so that's been unfortunate in the circumstance. Interesting, he told the party room today he'd made his comments and they didn't need further amplification. Well, he threw the grenade yesterday, Scott Morrison. So, yeah, it couldn't be more amplified. I think the Australian called it the lowest point in ties with the Chinese action, the Australian retaliation in 50 years. So I do think there's a chance of things settling down now. And Australia's made its point about the tweet and has had backing, as you pointed out, from several countries. The hope is now that things settle down.
Yeah, I just got to say one thing though. There's no suggestion, is there, that the Chinese ambassadors, called in for a formal dressing down. We know the tweet didn't come from someone, low down the food chain in the Chinese regime. It was a very senior, up and coming, person that has been known to almost be a government activist out there in the Twitter space. There's no move from the Prime Minister, if there isn't an apology, to take it further?
I don't believe so at this point. I certainly haven't heard that suggestion. We know Frances Adamson, the head of DFAT, contacted the ambassador by telephone yesterday to express her displeasure, and this statement was a response to that. So that seems to have been how this matter's been handled, or these tensions have been handled in the past. And no suggestion of a ministerial dressing down.
Right, I'll tell you someone else who's got a bit of a dressing down. That's the old ABC. A letter from the head of communications, the Minister of Communications, fired off to the chairman of the ABC in relation to those allegations of affairs between cabinet ministers and staff that were there on Four Corners. A pretty fiery letter from Paul Fletcher, who you would argue is not one of the most dramatic of the ministers, but clearly he's got some fire in his belly over this issue and the broadcaster's code of practice. Let's have a listen.
The letter is asking the question of the board, given your duty of impartiality, why is it that the only politicians who were the subject of the story are Liberal politicians? That's the question that is asked, and I will wait to see what answer the ABC gives to that.
So what's likely to happen here? I saw you interview the Minister this afternoon. What's he asking of the ABC chairman and board?
Well, he wants a response back for 14 days to say how it hasn't breached the ABC Code of Practice, and I guess he has the option after that to put a formal complaint, firstly to the ABC, usually that's rejected, and then you go to ACMA, the broadcasting regulator, and they can force an apology or those sorts of actions. I mean, we've spoken about this story before, Peter. I think we sort of agreed it was pretty half-cooked, to be frank. They seem to be pursuing an allegation and not getting there. They seem to, you know, they were attempting to build the case that the culture in Parliament hasn't been great for women. There probably is a case over time that you could mount in relation to that, but you need a lot better material and better people on camera than what they had. They had, for example, Sarah Hanson-Young saying this female staff had approached her. They said it was the woman Porter was with at the public bar in Manuka. I understand, well, the government is saying that that woman contests that she's ever spoken to Sarah Hanson-Young. So is it a case of mistaken identity, or is there something else at play where off-the-record conversations are being protected? But the point is, you know, it's just not that open and shut case, this story. It does go into people's private lives. Both men are divorced. They've paid a price. And if everything going on is consensual, there's no allegation of harassment. It does beg the... I mean, you can see why Fletcher's done what he's done, I suppose, particularly when Ida Buttrose, who said the Barnaby Joyce thing wasn't even a story on Channel 10 a couple of years ago, as chair of the ABC and managing director, ticked off on this yarn.
And I get Paul Fletcher's point that it was seemingly targeted to coalition MPs only. I mean, there's plenty of consensual affairs between Labor politicians and the media, between Labor politicians and their former staff, or in some cases there might have been a bit of crossover with the time the staff were on their books. So, you know, there's plenty of blame to go around, but it seems to be quite partisan in the way the ABC played it the other day.
Well, that's definitely one of the protests here. Now, it might have been the case that Four Corners were, as I've heard a rumour they were pursuing others but weren't able to stand it up. But apart from Michelle Miller going on the record against Alan Tudge, were they really able to stand up the allegations against Porter? I mean, they spoke about a photo getting taken. They didn't have the photo. They spoke about an ABC journalist taking the photo and being pressured by Tudge to delete it. Well, they didn't have the ABC journalist on camera. I mean, I just think about this as a journalist, Peter, and think about the editorial tests I have to undertake in order to put something to air and what my bosses at Sky would allow or say, we have enough to run that. And if you said, I don't have the photo, this photo was taken, oh, great, have you got the photo? No. Have you got the ABC journalist on camera? No. You know, what have you got? And I just don't think they had enough, and I suppose I'm sticking my neck out. I'll cop a lot of flack over that. But I just think about how I would approach it as a journalist, and you're talking about consensual relationships. In Porter's case, no complainant. And, you know,
no complainant.
These guys
and
got
the only mud thrown around, to someone as senior as an Attorney-General was allegedly poor behaviour, you know, 25 odd years ago when they were an undergraduate. Well, I'm about his vintage. I think, you know, none of us covered ourselves in glory every single day of our university life. But if that's something to condemn us for, I mean, half the Parliament would be out the back door. Anyway, got to leave it there. Thank you, Angela Clennell.
Thanks, Peter.